Trump says the Iran ceasefire is on life support. His team is openly talking about renewed military action, and the entire region is bracing for what comes next. If this talks collapse into strikes again, the fallout could hit oil, shipping, and U.S. interests almost immediately. What we're looking at today is bigger than one failed negotiation. It's a fast-moving story about whether the U.S. is headed back toward direct confrontation with Iran, while ceasefires in other parts of the region are also being tested or ignored. And depending on which outlet you read, the framing changes a lot. So it's worth separating the facts, the spin, and the wishful thinking. According to multiple reports, Trump is now seriously weighing a return to military action against Iran after the latest round of negotiations broke down. The immediate trigger was Tehran's counterproposal, which the White House rejected almost out of hand. Trump reportedly called it totally unacceptable, and in at least one version of events, he dismissed it in even blunter language. Iran's side says the American demands are unreasonable. That is their line, and of course they would say that. But the bigger point is that both sides seem to be talking past each other now. Iran wants sanctions relief and an end to pressure before it gives up leverage on its uranium stockpile. The US wants concessions on the nuclear issue first. That gap is not small. It's the whole deal. What makes this more dangerous is that Trump is not sounding like a president trying to slow things down. He's sounding like a president who feels he has been played. Reports say he's been briefed at the White House on military options by CENTCOM, and some administration officials are already talking as if a strike would be a limited warning shot rather than a full-scale war. That may sound cleaner on paper than it is in real life. Because once bombs start falling, there is no guarantee the other side treats it like a one-time message. Iran has repeatedly said it will respond to any aggression. And when governments make those kinds of threats, even if you think they're bluffing, the cost of testing them can be enormous. And there's another layer here. Trump appears to be using a familiar tactic. Public pressure, blunt language, dramatic leverage, and a willingness to keep everyone guessing. That can work in negotiations when the other side believes you're unpredictable. But it also carries real risk if the other side stops believing a deal is even possible. If you're getting value from this, hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Now, to be fair, some of the reporting on this story is coming through outlets with very clear angles. Some are outright hostile to Trump, and others are happy to amplify any sign of confrontation, without asking what the endgame actually is. The safer read is this: negotiations are broken, both sides are digging in, and the White House is preparing for the possibility that diplomacy is running out of road. And when diplomacy starts failing, the military always gets louder in the room. One reason this story matters so much is that the whole region has started to treat ceasefires like temporary pauses instead of actual settlements. Take Gaza. Some coverage describes the ceasefire there as if it exists in a legal and practical sense. But then, the same reporting says Israel has violated it thousands of times, with airstrikes, artillery, shootings, demolitions, and blockade aid. Whether you accept every number in those reports or not, the pattern is hard to ignore. The ceasefire has not produced real peace on the ground. Then there's Lebanon. UN Peacekeepers have reportedly documented a huge number of Israeli projectiles fired over just a few days, with more than 100 strikes in a single day and a rising death toll. Again, the politics around those reports are obvious. Some outlets lean heavily into Israel's explanations. Others present the attacks as proof the ceasefire was never serious to begin with. But whichever side you trust, the practical result is the same. The region is not calming down. That matters, because Iran is not watching this in a vacuum. Neither is Washington. If a ceasefire can be negotiated, announced, photographed, and then quietly violated, or stretched beyond recognition, then every future agreement becomes harder to trust. And that brings us to the Gulf. There are also reports that the UAE secretly launched attacks against Iran during the wider conflict, including strikes tied to oil infrastructure. If those claims are accurate, it shows something even more concerning. This is no longer just a US and Iran issue. It's a networked conflict where regional partners, proxies, air defenses, and back-channel cooperation all matter. According to those reports, the US was not particularly upset about Emirati involvement at the time because the ceasefire had not fully settled in. That should tell you something about the mindset here. Too many players are treating ceasefire as a political label rather than a binding reality. And if that sounds unstable, that's because it is. The real reason markets are nervous is the Strait of Hormuz. That narrow waterway is one of the most important choke points on the planet, and when shipping there gets disrupted, everybody feels it. Reports now say the strait is still effectively closed, or at least severely constrained, and that's already putting pressure on energy prices and global supply chains. Saudi oil interests are warning the market may not normalize this year if the route stays shut. That is the kind of line that gets attention in boardrooms, not just in Washington. The US has already pulled from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, releasing more than 50 million barrels to help stabilize energy markets. That's a big move, and it tells you the administration understands how quickly this can ripple into gasoline prices, freight costs, and public anger back home. This is where the libertarian instinct kicks in. Foreign entanglements are never just foreign. They come home 3 for a paycheck, your fuel bill, and your retirement account. That doesn't mean the US can ignore hostile behavior abroad. It does mean leaders should be very careful about choosing open-ended confrontation when the economic blowback is guaranteed. And if Trump is talking about force, he's also trying to use the economic pressure as part of the strategy. There are reports he may lean on China during an upcoming trip to help pressure Iran, since Beijing buys a large share of Iranian crude. In other words, the administration may be trying to use China's leverage over Iran as an indirect backstop.
That's smart in theory. The problem is that China is not going to do Washington many favors unless it clearly benefits Beijing. And if the US looks weak or indecisive, China has even less reason to play along. So now the administration is juggling three things at once: military threats, diplomatic collapse, and energy market panic. That is a dangerous combination. And there's one more detail worth noticing. Trump reportedly said he was disappointed the Kurds did not help move weapons into Iran for a potential uprising. That is a remarkable admission, because it suggests parts of this conflict are not just about nuclear policy or ceasefire terms. There has also been an effort, at least in the background, to destabilize Tehran internally. The administration may not say that directly in public, but the broad shape is clear: pressure from outside, pressure from within, and a belief that Iran can be boxed into concessions. The problem is that countries under pressure do not always fold. Sometimes they lash out. So what is Trump really doing here? There are two possible readings. The first is that he's trying to force a better deal. By threatening military action, he hopes Iran will return to the table and accept terms it previously rejected. That fits his style. He likes to create urgency, dominate the news cycle, and make the other side feel like time is running out. The second reading is that the administration is preparing for escalation, because the deal itself may already be dead. If so, then all the public talk about negotiation is just a runway to justify stronger action later. Either way, the immediate political logic is obvious. Trump does not want to look weak after being handed a bad response from Tehran. And he definitely does not want to own a long, messy stalemate where shipping is disrupted, oil spikes, and the public sees no clear victory. But here's the question nobody in the glossy headline cycle wants to answer cleanly. What does success look like? If the goal is to stop Iran's nuclear program, a few strikes won't magically solve it. If the goal is regime pressure, that is a much bigger and riskier undertaking. And if the goal is simply to send a message, history shows that messages sent with bombs often come with replies attached. That's why this moment feels so fragile.
The US has leverage, yes, but leverage is not the same thing as control. And when you look at the wider regional picture, there's not much reason for confidence. Gaza is still bleeding despite ceasefire language. Lebanon is still taking strikes despite ceasefire language. Iran and the US are still far apart despite mediation, and shipping through the Gulf is still under threat. The pattern is simple. The words are getting softer, but the actions are not. Here's the short version. Trump is now openly weighing renewed military action against Iran after negotiations collapsed again. Iran says the American demands are unreasonable, while Trump says Tehran's proposal is unacceptable. The bigger danger is that this comes at a time when ceasefires across the region are already viewed as fragile or unreliable. From Gaza to Lebanon, the Strait of Hormuz remains the critical pressure point, which means any escalation could hit energy prices, shipping, and the American consumer fast. And underneath all of it is a very old problem. Once both sides start using force to improve bargaining power, the chance of miscalculation goes way up. If you want more clear-eyed breakdowns like this, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment with what you think happens next. Does Trump push for a deal, or does this turn into another round of strikes? Either way, his story is moving fast, and the consequences could be huge.